Do you think we'll see crashes more frequently?
I think we're going to continue to see deeper and deeper ones.
So I think the next crisis is the one that's underway already in emerging markets.
Turkey is facing a debt crisis. The rand benefited today, though, because the central bank in Turkey raised interest rates by more than 6%. But it is a drastic move.
Argentina's central bank has raised interest rates to 60%, up from 45%, as the country's currency continues to plummet in value.
The central bank raising rates is not the solution.
The inflationary depression. Is that what's playing out right now in Turkey, in Argentina, in emerging markets more broadly?
Yeah, certainly.
Because if this emerging market crisis continues the way it is, again, you're seeing currencies down 30, 40, 50% against the dollar. There's going to be a crisis here. If they keep raising rates, those currencies are going to crash even worse.
The wait for the next global financial crisis is over. Major currencies all over the planet are in a death spiral. Many global stock markets are crashing, and economic activity is beginning to decline at a stunning rate in quite a few nations. Over the past 16 years, the emerging market debt bubble has grown from $9 trillion to $63 trillion. Yes, you are listening to that correctly. Now, that emerging market debt bubble is imploding, and as a result, the emerging market currencies all over the globe are in complete meltdown. In fact, at least 20 different currencies have fallen by double-digit percentages against the US dollar so far in 2018, and nobody is quite sure what is going to happen next. You may be tempted to think that this must be a good thing for the United States, since the value of the US dollar has been rising, but it is not. During the boom years, trillions of dollars were borrowed by emerging market economies, and a high percentage of those loans were denominated in US dollars. Now that their currencies are crashing, it's going to take much more local currency to service those US-denominated debts, and a whole lot of them are about to start going bad. That means that many financial institutions here in the United States and over in Europe are going to end up holding enormous piles of bad debt. The losses could potentially be astronomical. The dominoes are starting to fall, and even the mainstream media is admitting that what we are facing is really bad. For example, the following comes from CNBC, from an article entitled, "The Emerging Market Crisis is Back, and this time it's serious." The crisis has engulfed countries across the globe, from economies in South America to Turkey, South Africa, and some of the bigger economies in Asia, such as India and China. A number of these countries are seeing their currency fall to record levels, high inflation and unemployment, and in some cases, escalating tensions with the United States. When I say that the world has been on the greatest debt binge in human history since the last financial crisis, I am not exaggerating one bit. The emerging market debt bubble is now 3 times larger than it was in 2007, and it's 7 times larger than it was in 2002. Here is more from CNBC. Emerging markets are also heavily plagued by debt, and a stronger dollar makes it tougher for them to pay this debt. The latest data from the Institute of International Finance shows that debt in emerging markets, including China, increased from $9 trillion in 2002 to $21 trillion in 2007, and finally to $63 trillion in 2017. Of course, this bubble was going to burst. Anyone with half a brain should have been able to see that. Now we have a full-blown crisis on our hands, and nobody seems to have any idea how to solve it.
Take what's happening today in Argentina, Turkey, and like I say, emerging markets more broadly, and compare it, if you would, to some of the things that we might remember. There are some people who are old enough to recall the peso crisis of 1994, the Asian currency crisis of 97, or perhaps the Russian debt default in 98, or the Argentine default of 2001. This looks most like what to you?
Well, it looks like that. It looks like those.
As Charles Hughes Smith has observed, emerging market currencies all over the globe are in complete meltdown. As the chart illustrates, a great many currencies around the world are in complete meltdown. This is not normal. Nations that overborrow, overspend, and print too much of their currency to generate an illusion of solvency eventually experience a currency crisis as investors and traders lose faith in the currency as a store of value. In other words, the faith that it will have the same or more purchasing power in a month that it has today. I'm not sure that I even have the words to describe the financial carnage of that magnitude. Since the financial markets are not crashing here in the United States yet, most Americans do not really seem to be concerned about this crisis at this point, but that is a mistake. This meltdown has started with the weaker nations, but ultimately what we are witnessing is an unraveling of the entire global financial system. The fact that so many currencies are melting down at the same time is telling us the global financial system is unraveling, and unraveling fast. This is a symptom of a fatal disease. Currencies reflect all sorts of financial information. They're akin to taking an economy's pulse, trade balances, debt levels, interest rates, central bank policies, fiscal policies, and so on. The global financial system is interconnected, but this is not a viable excuse for the meltdown. The general explanation floating around is that currency weakness is like the flu. One currency gets it, and then it spreads to the other weak currencies. This diagnosis is misleading. What's actually happening is the unprecedented global bubble of debt and assets of the past decade is popping, and it's laying waste to the most indebted, over-leveraged and mismanaged nations first, either via stock market declines or meltdowns in currencies. We learned that the South African economy has officially plunged into a new recession. This crisis is spreading very quickly, and the United States won't be immune from what is happening.
Well, I think the biggest issue that South Africa is facing is it's really being swept away with all the weakness in other emerging markets, Turkey and Argentina. And remember, South Africa is one of the biggest destinations of EM fund allocations. Now, what you've had over the last 2 months is a series of significant negative data surprises, and that's really sweeping up South Africa in this EM storm. The market has not been as underweight South Africa as it has been other markets, and what's going on now is we're seeing an adjustment in that position. So we're actually quite negative on the rand because of these exposures.
This is a point that Charles Hughes Smith made very well as he wrapped up his most recent article. The illusion that the US is immune to the unraveling of debt and asset valuations won't last. When the defaults start piling up, so will the losses, and when the asset bubbles pop, incomes and spending decline. Although few seem to notice, almost half the profits of the S&P 500 corporations are earned overseas. The belief that US markets are somehow disconnected from global markets and immune to the repricing of risk, debt, assets and currencies is magical thinking.
This is really crazy what's going on. What do you think?
I think, corporate debt in the United States to GDP is at an all-time high. So the corporate sector generally is highly levered. The real risk is that fiscal irresponsibility on the Hill creates a dollar crisis. And a dollar crisis will radiate through the rest of the world.
I am entirely convinced that we have reached a major turning point. For several years, it has seemed like things have been getting better, but it was largely an illusion. Our ridiculously high standard of living was financed by the greatest debt binge in the history of the world, and it was inevitable that a day of reckoning would arrive. Now, that day of reckoning is knocking on the door, and our society is completely and utterly unprepared for what is going to happen next.